Marcus had always known he was destined for success. He had given everything to the company, years of hard work, dedication, and innovation. But none of that mattered now. Sitting in Richard's office, Marcus felt his world crumble as the words left Richard's mouth. "You're fired." It wasn't what Marcus did. It was who he was. And now, everything was about to change. Marcus sat in Richard's office, his hands resting on the arms of the leather chair, his mind racing. This meeting wasn't supposed to be like this. He had brought in millions of dollars in business. He had led teams to success after success. He was a star, everyone said so. So why was Richard looking at him with such cold indifference? Richard, calmly. "Your time here is done, Marcus." The words didn't make sense at first. They hung in the air like a bad joke that no one laughed at. Marcus blinked, sure that he had misheard. But then Richard leaned back in his chair, that same smug smile playing at the corners of his lips. Marcus, confused. "What do you mean I'm done? After everything I've done for this company?" Richard, cutting him off. "It's not about what you've done. It's who you are. We're moving in a different direction and you don't fit into that." Marcus felt a heat rise in his chest. He had worked harder than anyone else in this office, and now he was being dismissed, not because of his work, but because of something he couldn't change, because of who he was. Marcus stood up, his hands trembling, but he wasn't about to let this moment break him. As he walked out of Richard's office, he made a silent vow. This wasn't the end. He would show Richard exactly who he was, and when he was finished, Richard would regret every word. As Marcus walked out of the building, he felt the weight of injustice pressing down on him. But behind the anger was something else, a plan. Richard thought he could erase Marcus from the company, but Marcus wasn't going to disappear quietly. Marcus pulls out his phone and dials a number. On the other end, his friend and entrepreneur Darren picks up. Marcus, resolutely. "It's time. Let's start the company." Marcus had always been a fighter. He knew the value of hard work and sacrifice. But Richard's betrayal was different. It wasn't just about losing his job. It was about being told he didn't belong, that all his years of effort weren't enough. The sting of injustice burned deep, and as Marcus left the building, he wasn't thinking about defeat. He was already planning his next move. Marcus sat in his car outside the office building, staring at the sleek glass doors he had walked through hundreds of times. This place had been his life for years. Late nights, weekends, all of it given to a company that had now turned its back on him. The sting of Richard's words echoed in his mind. "It's not what you did. It's who you are." He clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Anger, humiliation, and pain mixed together in a boiling storm inside him. But underneath it all, there was something else. Determination. He wasn't going to let Richard have the last word. Marcus had grown up knowing that he'd have to work twice as hard to get half as much. His mother had always told him that life wasn't fair, but that didn't mean he had to accept it. He remembered the look in her eyes when she'd send him off to school, the unspoken warning that the world was not kind to people like them, but she also taught him to rise above it. Marcus, as a young boy, sits at the kitchen table with his mother, struggling with his homework. She places a gentle hand on his shoulder, saying, "You're going to face challenges, but you can't let them break you. You have to rise higher. No one can take away what you've earned." Marcus took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. He dialed Darren, his best friend since college and a successful entrepreneur who had always pushed him to break out on his own. Darren, answering the phone, concerned. "What's up, man? You sound off." Marcus, determined. "Richard fired me today. No warning, no reason, just out." There was a pause on the other end before Darren responded. Darren, calm but firm. "You know what I've been telling you for years. It's time to stop working for people like him. You're better than that. You should be running your own show." Marcus had heard this speech 100 times before, but this time it clicked. He had been too loyal, too invested in a company that didn't value him for who he was. Now, it was time for something different. "Marcus, you're right. Let's do it." As Marcus hangs up the phone, a smile tugs at the corners of his mouth. The first seed of his plan has been planted. He wasn't just going to move on, he was going to build something that would eclipse everything Richard had. And Richard? He would regret the day he fired Marcus. Marcus wasn't about to sit in defeat. Fired from the company he helped grow, he was already moving toward something bigger. But his plan wasn't just to succeed, it was to strike at the very heart of Richard's empire. The same clients who had trusted Marcus would now be key to his comeback. And the best part? Richard had no idea. Over the next few days, Marcus began making calls. The relationships he had built with clients over the years weren't just business, they were personal. These were people who trusted him, who knew the value he brought. If they found out what had happened, Marcus knew many of them would be willing to follow him. His first call was to Samuel Carter, a major client who had been working with Marcus for years. Samuel wasn't just a client, he was someone Marcus considered a mentor. They had built a rapport that extended far beyond the contracts they signed. Marcus, on the phone. "Samuel, it's Marcus. I wanted to talk to you about something important." There was a pause on the line before Samuel spoke. Samuel, concerned. "I've heard rumors, Marcus. What's going on?" Marcus explained everything, how Richard had fired him, how it wasn't about his performance but something much deeper. He kept it professional, but the anger in his voice was unmistakable. Samuel, supportive. "Marcus, you've always been the reason we've stuck with the company. I'm not happy to hear this, but I've always believed in you. If you're starting something new, count me in." With Samuel on board, Marcus's plan started to take shape. If he could bring over just a few more key clients, Richard's company would be in serious trouble. The wheels of revenge were already in motion. Marcus worked tirelessly over the next week, securing meetings with other major clients. Each conversation was delicate. He didn't want to burn bridges, but he needed them to know that working with him directly would be more beneficial than staying with a company that no longer valued integrity. Slowly but surely, his new venture started to gain traction. Darren, meanwhile, was working behind the scenes to set up the infrastructure for Marcus's new company. They filed the necessary paperwork, found office space, and even began hiring a small but dedicated team. Everything was falling into place. But just as Marcus began to feel momentum building, he received a message on his phone. It was from an unknown number, and the words sent a chill down his spine. "We know what you're doing. You're making a mistake." Marcus stared at the message, his heart racing. The game was on. But who had sent the warning? And how much did they know? Richard was starting to feel the cracks in his empire. The whispers had reached his ears. Clients were unhappy, deals were falling through, and something wasn't right. But he couldn't put his finger on it. What he didn't know was that Marcus was behind it all, and the worst was yet to come. At first, Richard dismissed the early signs of trouble. A few late payments, some unhappy clients, nothing he couldn't handle. But soon, the problems began to stack up. Major accounts were pulling out of deals, and some of the company's longest-standing clients were expressing dissatisfaction with the way things were being run. Richard's confidence wavered. He called an emergency meeting with his top executives, demanding answers. But no one had an explanation. The company, once stable and profitable, was suddenly on shaky ground, and the root of the problem seemed elusive. One evening, Richard sat in his office poring over financial reports. The numbers didn't lie. Something was seriously wrong. As he rubbed his temples, exhausted and frustrated, his phone buzzed with a message. It was anonymous, and it read, "It's not over yet. Marcus is coming for you." Richard's hand tightened around the phone. Marcus. Could it really be him? He had dismissed Marcus as a threat after firing him, convinced that the man would fade into obscurity. But now, with everything falling apart, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus had something to do with it. The message gnawed at Richard's mind. If Marcus was behind this, he would need to act quickly. But how far had Marcus gotten? And what would Richard do to stop him? Richard is making a phone call to a private investigator. His instructions are simple. Find Marcus. I need to know what he's up to, and I need to stop him. Will Richard discover Marcus's plan before it's too late, or is he already too late? Marcus's plan was in full swing. With key clients backing him and a new company taking shape, he was poised to take on Richard's empire head-on. But success came with its own risks, and Marcus knew that Richard wouldn't let this slide without a fight. Tadu. Marcus's company was gaining momentum faster than he had anticipated. The clients he had brought over were loyal, and the new business model they had developed was drawing attention in the industry. Word was spreading. Marcus's company wasn't just another startup, it was a force to be reckoned with. Darren, who had been instrumental in getting the company off the ground, was thrilled with the progress. Together, they strategized for growth, expanding their team and reaching out to even more potential clients. It felt like a dream coming true, but Marcus knew the stakes were high. Richard wasn't going to stand by and let this happen without retaliation. Marcus, reflective. We're doing something big, Darren, but Richard isn't going to let this go. We need to be ready for whatever he throws at us. Darren, confident. Let him come. We've got something stronger than he ever did, integrity, and that's what's going to win in the end. As Marcus's company grows, so does the risk. Will Marcus's past come back to haunt him? And how will Richard respond as his own company begins to crumble? Just as Marcus and Darren are celebrating a major new deal, Marcus receives a legal notice from Richard's company, accusing him of stealing clients and proprietary information. It's a move to crush Marcus before his business fully takes off. Will this lawsuit stop Marcus's momentum, or will he find a way to fight back? From this point, the story continues to build with escalating conflict between Marcus and Richard, culminating in Marcus's ultimate triumph and Richard's downfall. Each chapter should maintain the fast pace, include mini-hooks to sustain engagement, and end with strong cliffhangers to keep the audience wanting more. Let me know if you'd like to continue the story from here or need further development for specific chapters. Just when Marcus's new business was taking off, Richard struck back. The lawsuit wasn't just an attack on his business, it was personal. Richard was determined to destroy Marcus before he could rise any higher. But Marcus wasn't going to back down. He had come too far to let Richard win again. The legal notice sat on Marcus's desk like a ticking time bomb. Richard had accused him of stealing proprietary information and poaching clients, claims that could bury Marcus's new company before it had the chance to flourish. It was a bold move, and it was clear that Richard was ready to fight dirty. Marcus's heart raced as he read the accusations, but beneath the panic there was also a simmering anger. This was the same man who had fired him without cause, who had belittled him for years. And now, when Marcus was finally finding his footing, Richard was trying to tear him down again. But this time, Marcus wouldn't go down quietly. He picked up the phone and called Darren, who was just as furious. Darren, gritting his teeth. Richard's scared. That's the only reason he'd pull a stunt like this. He knows we're a threat. Marcus, determined. We need a strategy. I'm not letting him win. With the lawsuit hanging over his head, Marcus knew he needed to act fast. He couldn't afford to lose clients or damage his reputation. But this battle wasn't just about business. It was about proving that Richard's power was no match for Marcus's resilience. Marcus and Darren quickly assembled a legal team, one that was just as aggressive as Richard's. They combed through every contract, every client interaction, making sure that there was no basis for Richard's accusations. At the same time, Marcus quietly reached out to his clients, ensuring that they knew the lawsuit was just an attempt to discredit him. Weeks passed, and the tension grew. The lawsuit loomed over Marcus's business like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow everything he had worked for. But instead of breaking him, the pressure only fueled his determination. He had been down this road before, fighting against people who thought they could control his fate. But Marcus wasn't the same person he had been when Richard fired him. He was stronger now. Just as Marcus's legal team prepares to counter Richard's claims, they discover something shocking. evidence that Richard had been manipulating contracts and business deals for years, committing fraud at the highest levels. It's a bombshell revelation, one that could not only exonerate Marcus but also bring Richard's entire empire crashing down. Will Marcus use this information to take Richard down once and for all, or will Richard find a way to cover his tracks? Marcus's legal team had uncovered something explosive, evidence that Richard had been manipulating deals and committing fraud. It was the smoking gun Marcus needed, but with this new discovery came even greater risks. If Marcus exposed Richard's corruption, there would be no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever, but Marcus was ready to fight. The discovery of Richard's fraudulent activities was a game-changer. Marcus's legal team had found documentation that linked Richard to unethical business practices, including manipulating contracts, bribing officials, and siphoning funds from the company. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. This was a chance to bring down Richard's entire operation. Marcus knew the risks of going public with this information. Richard was powerful, and exposing him could trigger a backlash that would put everything, his business, his clients, even his personal safety, in jeopardy. But the opportunity was too great to ignore. This was the moment Marcus had been waiting for, the chance to not just win, but to take Richard down for good. Marcus sat with Darren, discussing their next move. Darren, leaning forward. We need to go public with this. The world needs to know who Richard really is. Marcus, thinking it through. Once we do this, there's no going back. He'll come after us with everything he's got. Darren, firm. Let him. We've got the truth on our side. As Marcus and Darren prepare to expose Richard, they know that the next few days will determine everything. Will Marcus's revelation bring Richard's empire crashing down, or will Richard strike back harder than ever? Marcus contacted a well-known journalist, someone he trusted to tell the story objectively. The journalist was intrigued by the case, especially when Marcus revealed the extent of Richard's corruption. They agreed to meet in person to discuss the details, and Marcus felt the weight of what was about to happen. But, even as the plan moved forward, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. The closer they got to exposing Richard, the more dangerous the situation became. The chapter ends with Marcus walking into the meeting with the journalist, only to find the place ransacked and the journalist missing. A single message is left behind on the wall, written in red ink. You're next. Has Richard found out about Marcus's plan? How far will Richard go to protect his empire? Marcus was on the verge of exposing everything. Richard's fraud, his corruption, the lies he had built his empire on. But now, it was clear that Richard was willing to do whatever it took to stop him. The threats were real, and Marcus knew he had to be careful. The final showdown was coming, and only one of them would come out on top. Marcus's heart pounded as he stared at the message on the wall. You're next. It was clear that Richard's reach extended far beyond the boardroom. If the journalist had been silenced, Marcus knew he could be next, but he had come too far to back down now. Marcus quickly called Darren, explaining what had happened. Darren's voice was calm but serious. Darren, steely. We can't stop now. We've got everything we need to bring him down, but we have to be smart about it. We need to move quickly, before Richard can make another move. Marcus agreed. They needed to go public immediately. He reached out to a network of trusted contacts, people who could help spread the story far and wide. Within hours, Marcus had gathered enough support to launch a full-scale media campaign. The evidence of Richard's corruption was too damning to ignore, and Marcus knew that once the story broke, Richard's empire would crumble. But time was running out. As Marcus prepares to go public, he receives an anonymous tip. Richard is planning to flee the country. If Marcus doesn't act fast, Richard could escape justice altogether. Marcus and Darren scramble to get the story out before it's too late. They work around the clock, coordinating with journalists, media outlets, and legal authorities. The pressure is immense, but Marcus remains focused. This is his moment, and he won't let it slip away. Just as Marcus is about to release the story, he gets a call from a blocked number, or it's Richard. Richard, calmly. "You think you've won, Marcus? You have no idea what you're up against." The call ends abruptly, leaving Marcus to wonder what Richard's next move will be. The final showdown is coming, and the stakes couldn't be higher. What does Richard have planned? Will Marcus be able to bring him down before it's too late? After months of fighting, Marcus was ready to deliver the final blow. The evidence was undeniable, the public was on his side, and Richard's empire was crumbling. But even in defeat, Richard wasn't going down without a fight. Marcus had one final move to make, and it would determine the outcome of everything. The media storm hit Richard's company like a tidal wave. The story of his corruption spread across headlines, news channels, and social media. Investors pulled out, clients fled, and Richard's reputation was in tatters. The legal authorities launched an investigation, and within days, Richard was facing charges that could land him in prison for years. But even as his world crumbled, Richard remained defiant. Marcus watched as Richard's empire collapsed. It should have felt like victory, but there was still a lingering sense of danger. Richard wasn't finished, not yet. Then, one evening, Marcus received a final message from Richard. It was short, cryptic, and chilling. "You took everything from me. Now, I'll take everything from you." Richard's threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Even as Marcus celebrated his victory, he knew that Richard wasn't done fighting. But what could Richard do now, with his power gone? As the days passed, Marcus kept a close watch on Richard's movements. He knew that Richard would try something. He just didn't know what. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He had beaten Richard at his own game, and now he was ready for whatever came next. Richard being arrested at the airport, attempting to flee the country. As the police lead him away in handcuffs, he glares at the cameras and mouths the words, "This isn't over." Is this truly the end of Richard's reign, or is there more danger lurking in the shadows? Marcus had won. Richard's empire was in ruins, and justice had been served. But Marcus's story wasn't just about revenge. It was about building something better. With Richard out of the way, Marcus was free to create a legacy of integrity, success, and respect. With Richard in prison and his company dismantled, Marcus could finally breathe. The lawsuit had been dropped, his business was thriving, and he was being hailed as a hero in the industry. But for Marcus, this wasn't just about victory. It was about creating a new path, one built on ethics, fairness, and hard work. As Marcus looked out at his growing company, he knew that this was just the beginning. He had turned a moment of injustice into an opportunity for growth, proving that resilience and determination could overcome even the most deeply ingrained forms of prejudice. Marcus wasn't just a businessman. He was a leader, a mentor, and an example of what it meant to rise above adversity. Marcus's story is proof that success isn't just about winning, it's about standing up for what's right. In the face of injustice, he didn't back down. He rose above, and in the end, his legacy was one of triumph. Like this story? Subscribe for more empowering tales of resilience, justice, and victory. The story closes with Marcus reflecting on his journey. He's not driven by revenge anymore. He's driven by the desire to build something lasting. His company is now a model of ethical business practices, and Marcus is celebrated not just for his success, but for his integrity. As he prepares for the next chapter of his life, Marcus receives one last message, a thank you note from one of his former colleagues who had also suffered under Richard's leadership. The note reads, "Thank you for showing us all what true leadership looks like." Marcus smiles, knowing that his story isn't just about his own victory. It's about inspiring others to fight for what's right. Justice, integrity, and resilience. These are the values that define Marcus's legacy. Want to hear more stories like this? Subscribe now and be part of a community where the underdog always wins.